Welcome to our lesson 2. We are going to look at issues, problems, or challenges in education. These ones are the challenges that we come across in our system of education. We divide them as per the levels or stages. Each stage or level has its own unique issues, although some of them cut across the board. So our first section will look at issues, challenges or problems in preschool education. This one is the ECD, early childhood education in our own situation. And one of the major problems here is the multiplicity of the institutions offering this education. All of us are aware that ECD is offered in very many types of institutions. We talk about baby care or daycare centers. We have kindergartens, nursery schools, and pre-units. All these ones offer preschool education from the very young children to those ones who are ready to join primary schools. The institutions, there are many and of many types. The activities are largely uncoordinated in that each institution decides what to do with what group of children. These institutions are owned, run, and managed by different bodies, including private individuals, religious organizations, local government authorities, local communities, and welfare organizations and NGOs. Even in your own locality, you can count 5 nursery schools, then find out who owns each of those nursery schools. You'll be surprised that not 2 of them are owned by one organization. One is owned by the church, the other one is by the local community, the other one by a welfare organization, the other one by a private individual, the other one by an NGO. So you can expect all sorts of differences within those institutions. Again, we have another issue of facilities and infrastructure in the nursery schools. These ones differ according to the locality and ownership of the institution. In our 5 nursery schools that we sampled, if you visit those schools, you realize that some of them have very good facilities, other ones have nothing that you can call facilities. They only have maybe a room for a classroom and nothing else as far as facilities are concerned. And those ones that are found in urban centers are very well endowed as far as facilities are concerned. They are permanent buildings, they have classes for each age group, and they have both indoor and outdoor teaching learning facilities that can attract you even from a distance. You are able to locate a nursery school from very far because of the outdoor facilities that you can see on the compound. They also have enough human resource in that if there are 5 different classrooms, they could have 5 different teachers in a nursery school for that matter. They could also have maybe a watchman, maybe a cook, a driver if they have transport, and all that entails the human resource. If you go to the rural areas, the situation is very different from this. Our rural nursery school could have only 1 room that accommodates all children in that compound, starting from the youngest, maybe up to the one who is ready to join primary school. They are taught in 1 class by 1 teacher. This same teacher could be the one who is acting as the school accounts clerk. They take care of the funds in the school. There is no security in the school, so no watchman. They don't provide meals in the school, so there is no cook. They have no transport for the children, and therefore there is no driver. So in a rural school, the teacher does everything for the children. In an urban setting, we could have maybe even 10 people within a nursery school compound in form of human resource. Then we have the curriculum offered in these schools. This one is a big issue in that we have to consider what is being taught to each age group. Remember, we have the 3-year-olds, the 4-year-olds, the 5-year-olds who are ready to join class 1. If you put these children in 1 room, the 3, 4, 5 years, you don't have to teach them the same content. One group is a play group. They do not have to learn anything in terms of literacy. They only need to play around. If you put them together with those ones aged 5 to 6 years who need to be prepared for literacy classes, then one group is being disadvantaged. And therefore, this content The curriculum has to consider that by the end of the course, it has taken care of the physical, that is especially the play group. They play around, they have time for sleep. The mentor, remember they are growing mentally, and therefore we have to take care of the stages they go through. Emotional and spiritual development of the child. You realize that in a nursery school, the curriculum includes songs. Sometimes they read Bible verses. Sometimes they play around. So you have to take care to teach them how to pray. You have to teach them spiritual content, and also teach them songs, and especially religious songs. So we prepare them spiritually, physically, emotionally, and also mentally. We have lack of relevant teaching learning materials, especially in the rural nursery schools, whereby a typical timetable includes indoor free choice activities. Within the class, we could have toys around. The child has freedom to choose which play they want to perform at any particular time. We have group activities where they do activities as groups. Of course, you have to look at their age and also their interests. We also have routine activities such as you have to check on their hygiene. Are they clean? Are they well groomed? And you also have to take care of their, apart from the grooming, you have to take care of their, whatever they are using in form of, probably if they are carrying any food from home, ensure that whatever they are carrying with them is clean. Routine activities include inspections, the sleeping time for the children, and also the play time for the same. And then you have the content of the curriculum. If you look at the ECD curriculum in many countries, especially in African countries, it is heavily borrowed from Western cultures. This is where we give our children toys like cars, and you know that in our rural settings, children really interact with vehicles or cars. So if you give them toy cars in school, when they get home, they don't see this in their environments. So those toys actually remove them from their own cultures, and mentally they want to adopt the Western cultures. At least we should look at the cultures as far as the toys are concerned. Whatever we have in our environment, let it be the toys that we have in the schools. And then some of the curriculum content is very relevant to us in our local cultural setups. The same could be said of the themes, ideas and theories on child development on which preschool education is based. So when it comes to theories on child growth, we have those theories in the Western cultures. In our own setting, we know how our children grow up, probably their age. If you compare a child in the Western cultures with a child in the Western cultures, our child's growth is slow as far as education is concerned. So in the Western world, a child of 3 or 4 years could be reasoning at a higher level than our own child of 6 to 7 years. So when you're looking at the content of curriculum, consider the age and the environment of the child. Under the same preschool, the training of the ECD teachers is conducted in a wide range of institutions. These institutions are under varied ownership. We have many of them owned by the private sector. We have churches owning some of them. You have the national government owning some of the institutions, and the local government authorities. Some local communities also set up their own institutions, and NGOs have similar institutions. The issue here is these institutions are run by very many bodies: the churches, the individuals, the government, the national government, the local government authorities, and the local communities. So what do you expect? Variations as far as these institutions are concerned. Their variations could come in the form of admissions criteria. For instance, we have the private individuals who admit nursery school teachers in the institutions. They may require C+ and above, or a C for one to undertake an ECD course for a degree. For a certificate, they could go for a C-. For a diploma, a C-, a certificate, a C, or a D+. What we are saying is, these institutions have different admissions criteria for their learners. Again, the duration of the training. Some institutions offer a training maybe for 1 year or 2 years. Others could offer the training in a few months. Others offer the training in phases, maybe a few weeks in April, a few weeks in August, a few weeks in December, and the learner is through with the course. The end results are variations and lack of common standards. So if you're able to call 5 different nursery school teachers in your locality, ask them where they were trained, ask them what grade they had at Form 4. Some of them never went to high school. Some of them just finished class 8 and joined an institution to do ECDE. So you'll be surprised that you do not have common standards as far as the training of ECD teachers is concerned. Maybe in the recent past, when the county governments take over, they may at least give us some criteria for ECD training. Then you have issues in primary education. Of course, this one is a very big sector, and the major one is the universal primary education by 1980. We call it the UPE. This 1980 target was set in the report of the Conference of African States on the Development of Education that was held in Addis Ababa in 1961. This target has been set in all African countries, but recently, or in the recent past, each African country is committed to achieving this goal as part of the post-independence achievements. So what has happened is, each country has set its own date for achieving universal primary education. Of course, even in our own country, we have not been able to realize this, as if you're able to walk around, you realize that some people never go to primary school for reasons known to them, because this primary education is free and compulsory, yet not everybody goes for it. So you have not yet achieved the universal primary education, and you can imagine this situation is common in many African countries. So the year 2015 was a new year for achieving the UPE. We are long past that year, and yet many African countries have not been able to achieve it. We are still struggling to achieve universal primary education. Then you have the gender equality, whereby there are many barriers that challenge education opportunities for the girl child. Some of them include education, culture, early pregnancies, early marriages, etc. And these problems are very, very well known to us. In the recent past, the girl child has had to drop out of school because of the various challenges we are talking about. Some religions discourage them from going to school. Other cultures are negative about education for the girl child. And the issue of early pregnancies is very real to us. For instance, after the COVID-19 break of 7 or 8 months, many girls went back to school pregnant. And it is good that our government decided that all of them be given a chance to go back to school, and even after delivery, they can still go back and finish their primary school and proceed to secondary school. We have some cultures that encourage early marriages. And if you take an example of the Maasai people, they have this as part of their culture. Early marriages are part of their culture. And what we do is to maybe educate them on the dangers of early marriages. Otherwise, girls are disadvantaged because of performing most of the domestic duties in their homes, and they're usually the ones that are asked to be sent to school and the first ones to be withdrawn. If you take a scenario of our family that has 2 children who have done KCPE, a girl and a boy, a son and a daughter, if there is school fees for only one of them to join Form 1, the boy will be taken to school first, the girl waits for her chance when fees is available. When the same family has a challenge or a problem, maybe one of the parents is unwell and needs to be taken care of, the girl is the first one to be withdrawn from school to take care of the sick parent. So imagine she was the last one to go to school and the first one to be called back home to take care of the sick parent. The other challenge is child labor. In the whole of Africa, we have over 250 million child laborers. Not even in Africa, but in the whole world. 250 million child laborers. Most of them come from poor families that are headed by single parents. And these children from poor families, although they may start school, they drop out of school at one level or another. We know why they drop out of school, maybe lack of school fees. They go out to work to get their daily bread, or to even supplement what their parents get wherever they are employed. The other issue is quality of primary education. This one has been compromised in the efforts to provide universal primary education. So when we are after providing education for everybody, the standards go down. And this can be observed because a large number of children from sub-Saharan Africa, they leave primary schools where they are functionally illiterate due to poor quality schooling. We have very large classes in primary schools, especially class 5, 6, and 7, whereby you can find a class of 70 pupils, and the teacher is supposed to handle that class alone. So what happens is, the teacher may never have individual instructions for every child. And out of 70 children, they are not all of the same level. Some of them are slow learners, others are fast learners. So the teacher will not have personal or individual instructions for every child. Then we are talking about the children being functionally illiterate. They are going to finish their primary school, but when they go out there, they cannot do anything without a teacher because they were used to, the teacher used to instruct them for the purpose of passing exams, not for practical purposes, because of the large classes that we have in primary schools. The other challenge is HIV and AIDS. Although this one has been overtaken by other events, this one affects school attendance for both the pupils, teachers, and even some parents. And in some situations, children become heads of their families, or they stay at home to take care of sick parents and relatives. We realize that even parents can be affected by HIV and AIDS, and as I'm putting it, we have other challenges that have come after HIV and AIDS. For instance, COVID-19. This one affects school attendance for pupils, teachers, especially teachers and parents, because they are the ones that are in that group of being vulnerable. Then we have issues in secondary education. One of them is the aims and objectives of secondary education. Traditionally, this education was aimed at preparing students for higher stroke university education. So what happens is, all those ones who join from 1, we expect all of them to go to university, which is not realistic. So what happens is, in a class of probably 50, only 5 of them can go to university. The rest will stop school at high school. They'll stop schooling at Form 4. Then they go out and do other things like business, farming, and what have you. And yet, we gave them a curriculum that was preparing them to go to university, which means most of what they learned will never be practical in their life. Then the other issue is access and affordability. High school education is expensive. Again, the chances are very few. Even up to now, as we talk of free secondary education, or we talk of 100% transition to Form 1, remember that not all people who start for KCPE will be able to join Form 1. The opportunities are not enough for everybody. And again, there is a cost to joining high school. It may not be school fees, but you have other hidden costs like the uniform, the lunch program, and other costs that the school may require. Again, many parents may not afford this, and so let us not blame parents so much for not taking their children to high school, because there is a cost that may be hidden in our own situation. By the year 2002, the gross enrollment ratio, that's the GER, in secondary schools for both boys and girls was 26% in sub-Saharan Africa. In the year 2004, only 46% of those people who sat for KCPE in Kenya, of course, got vacancies to go to secondary schools. That was in the past. Right now, the situation is very different because we have the 100% transition to Form 1. And as I'm putting it, it is not yet 100% transition. We still have some people who don't go to Form 1 for their own reasons. Then, this is an indication of how transition rates in many African countries can be very low. You enroll 100% in class 1. By the time they get to class 5, they are 80%. By the time they get to class 8, they are 60%. By the time they go to Form 1, they are only 26%. And that is what we call transition rates. They are very low in many African countries. The third issue is gender and regional equity, whereby in the year 2002, the gross enrollment ratio for boys was 22% and girls 14% in sub-Saharan Africa. In Kenya, for instance, the rates for both boys and girls were 22% in the rural areas and 47% in the urban centers. In simple terms, we talk about secondary schools in urban centers. Children in urban centers are able to go to Form 1 very easily. But in the rural areas, we may not have that accessibility. Again, gender issue. The girls have a disadvantage in that some parents may feel that a girl who has done KCPE is mature enough maybe to get married and start their family. For regional equity, we have the areas that are challenged. For instance, the marginalized communities. Those are the ones that suffer from what we call regional equity, in that they may have very few girls in high school, while in the urban centers, you have very many girls joining high schools. The ratio for the arid and semi-arid lands, the ASANs, I'm calling them the marginalized in Kenya, 20% as compared to 55% in Central Province, which is one of the more economically developed regions in the country. The comparison here is, if you go to Turkana County, which is one of the ASALs in Kenya, we have 20% of people joining Form 1. If you come to Central Kenya, then you have 55% of children joining Form 1 because of the economic disparities. Turkana is economically challenged, while Kiambu may be economically well endowed and they can afford to take their children to school. And this situation is repeated in many African countries. There are very many imbalances as far as the gender and regional equity is concerned. We cannot have all regions with equal numbers or both gender with equal numbers. The other issue is knowledge gap, whereby we have a very high turnover of knowledge and its application in the area of science and technology. This one has led to a big gap between Africa and the developed world. Take an example of the ICT in our schools. We have very many challenges in our African schools and even in the Kenyan schools, whereby you talk about ICT, that one is very strange to them. Go to the Western world, the children are very comfortable as far as the use of IT in their schools is concerned. I would again see the same disparity in our schools in the rural areas and in our urban centers. And then, internal and external efficiency, whereby secondary education in Africa faces many challenges, including high rates of wastage. I commented that we can enroll 50% of children in our Form 1, but by the time they get to Form 3 and Form 4, we don't have the 50%, we have 45 or 40%. That is what we are calling wastage. Where have the 5% or the 10% gone? They have dropped out of school. This comes in form of school dropouts, absenteeism, low transition rates, and unemployment. Some of them get discouraged that even after going through school, there will be no employment for them. So they use that reason to drop out of school. Absenteeism could be a result of what we call child labor. A child goes to school for 4 days. One day they go to work in the fields to supplement their parents' income. Dropouts are a result of very many things. For instance, the early pregnancies we talked about. Then you have indiscipline and violence in secondary schools, especially in African countries. Secondary school education is disrupted or interrupted by incidents of indiscipline. Sometimes these ones are manifested in bizarre incidents such as arson, rape, murder, and destruction of property. This one is not new to us. Of course, we have had media reports whereby students in high school have set their own dormitories on fire. They have set on fire their own school buses and even their own classrooms. That is what we call arson. For rape, we have had incidents even in the very recent past, whereby some boys' schools try to invade girls' schools at night, of course, with a very negative agenda, like rape. Then we have murder, whereby we have had reports of students murdering teachers because of probably differences, and even they do the same among themselves. If a dormitory is set on fire and the children are sleeping, the students are asleep, some of them may end up burning in the fire. And this is not news to us. We have had incidents in this country that are similar to that. Of course, destruction of property is very common among high school students. If you look at the reasons behind that, there are very many. These people are adolescents, and we know their challenges in the adolescence age. They have very poor role models in form of parents and leaders. Of course, they also have other, we call them socioeconomic issues. They hear there are very many problems in the society, and they want to maybe to be part of the society by creating a scenario in their schools that can attract the attention of the leaders in this country or even the whole society. Then you have issues in higher/university education. One of them is the mission and vision of higher education. This one has been described in various ways. For instance, in 1962, UNESCO stressed on the need for higher education to integrate equally the missions of production, transmission, and utilization of knowledge and skills, promoting the African cultural heritage, as well as contributing to the reinforcement of independent African unity. These ones have to be integrated as far as the mission and vision of higher education is concerned. Let us not only prepare our students in higher education for employment or production. Let us integrate that with promoting the African cultural heritage. Our culture is very rich, and some of it could be the form of employment for the students when they are through with their education. And of course, let us instill in them the African unity. The other issue is socioeconomic equity, whereby students' enrollment in higher education does not reflect the socioeconomic diversity of the country. For instance, in our situation, we have our students, majority of them are drawn from high and middle class urban families, while the minority come from the lower class peasant families who reside in the rural areas. And when you do that, you are offering education to the upper and the middle class, and you are denying the same education to the lower class. That means the cycle will continue, whereby a student from the lower class may not access university education, and therefore the poverty cycle will continue in that family. So we continue to give advantage to those ones in the upper class and the middle class, while we disadvantage those ones in the lower class because of the socioeconomic equity, that they cannot afford fees in the universities. Of course, there is a need to balance the numbers, as this education is financed by the taxpayers. We are simply saying our higher education is financed by the taxpayers. And you know that even in the lower class of the society, they still pay taxes. So why don't we give them chance to take the children to university so that they can benefit from that education and maybe break what we are calling the poverty cycle in their families. The other issue is ethnic and regional equity. In Africa and even in Kenya, there are those regions that are politically favored and economically more endowed than others. That means the same regions that are politically favored and economically more endowed are the ones that are going to present a very big number of their children to institutions of higher learning as well as leadership positions. So don't be surprised that if you go to any university, you take a sample of students and ask them where they come from. You may find a very big number belonging to one maybe region of the country, very few from another region of the country. And of course, when it comes to leadership positions, those ones who come from this advantaged region are still the ones that you get chance for leadership in this country. The other issue is gender and regional equity, whereby the access of women to higher education has only increased in the recent past. Currently, We have an average of 28% in most African countries. We are saying that if you go to higher education and look at the gender balance in those institutions, you may realize that women are very few while we are very many in the other gender. And of course, this could also take into consideration the courses they take. Some courses are favorable to women, others are maybe favorable to the gentlemen. And then what we have as a form of an imbalance is more pronounced among the academic and administrative staff in the African universities. We are simply saying, when you go to any African university and look at the people working there, as administrators and even the teaching staff, you may realize that women are very few, while the men are the majority. This one comes from the gender regional equity. There is a lot of disparity here, a lot of imbalance when it comes to the gender among students and among the staff. Then you have the blank academic year, which means that in French it is known as année blanche. This one has resulted from the wind of democracy that has swept across Africa since the 1990s. We have students demanding for their rights. When they demand for their rights, sometimes the way they do it is not very encouraging to the government. So what happens is the government responds to the students and staff discontent in a very strange way. Sometimes the institutions are closed down. The students are sent home by force. And when they are sent home by force, it takes time for them to come back to the institutions. And what happens is, all this time that they are at home, that one constitutes to what we are calling the blank academic year. They have been sent home for 1 or 2 months. When they come back, they have to start all over again from where they stopped. If they have been at home for 3 or 4 months, that one means a whole semester for the students. And of course the staff are still at home. But for the staff, they have an advantage. They can go looking for jobs elsewhere. So what has happened is, this blank academic year is very common even now. For instance, the year 2020, that one can be a blank academic year as far as education is concerned. It was not caused by any crisis apart from the long closure that was necessitated because of the COVID-19 outbreak. We were at home for maybe 7 or 8 months. That one could mean a semester or 2 in a university, and of course, that one will become a blank academic year in the final analysis. This one means the completion time is extended for the students. The ones who are supposed to complete their studies in the year 2021 may complete the studies in the year 2022. So there has been a blank academic year for them. For the students, they suffer, they waste time, their completion time is extended. For the staff, they go looking for jobs elsewhere. And of course, this one leads to what we are calling brain and resource drain. The brains of the staff are exported to other countries, and for the resources, they remain idle. The institutions were closed down, the facilities were not being used, and that one is a resource drain. The other challenge is management of space. So when we talk about space, we refer to the physical spaces of the institutions. Of course, universities have their physical spaces in the form of classrooms or lecture theaters. What has happened is, we are in an era whereby higher education is on a very high demand. The study has realized higher education is very important in life. So everybody now is after getting a degree. And what has happened is, the physical space is not enough. This problem has been compounded by the fact that the government is not sending enough funds to the institutions. And therefore, the institutions have devised their own ways of making use of their physical spaces to offer education to the many students who require it. And what has happened is, many modules have been introduced. Modules of studies are very many, call them modules or modes of study. So universities have learned to make use of their physical space more efficiently and also adopt other strategies. This is by introducing various study modules, such as the regular program, where students have very many contact hours. We have the distance and institution-based learning. Students learn for maybe a few weeks, then they go back to their places of work. We have the virtual e-learning campuses, whereby students learn online throughout. They only come to institutions, maybe to sit for examinations or even for graduation. Everything else is being done virtually. We have the alternative work and study trimesters. For those ones who can afford it, they can get study leave from their employers and come to pursue education and still go back to their place of work when they are through. If you look at all these study modules, they're able to combine distance, time, space, technology, and institutional facilities to offer education to those ones who require and can afford it. And most of us are beneficiaries of those many modules of study. You can study at your own comfort and at your own convenience. Thank you very much. That one is the end of our lesson 2. Thank you and stay safe.